I've owned that stretch of land off Route 26 for almost 30 years, and I never thought I'd live long enough to see somebody pave over half of it like I wasn't even alive. The morning I found out, I was heading back from grabbing coffee in town, took my usual turn by the frontage road, glanced over out of habit, and hit my brakes so hard my thermos slammed into the passenger door. For a second, I honestly thought I was looking at the wrong property. There was fresh black asphalt covering a huge chunk of my land, striped parking spaces painted bright white, yellow concrete curbs lined up clean as a showroom, trucks backed in, a couple RVs parked near the edge, and two tall pole lights standing there like they'd been there for years. It looked finished, permanent, like somebody had decided my property belonged to them and never once considered asking permission. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring. That land sits right outside Carson Ridge, Oregon, 3 acres of highway frontage I bought back in '98 when prices were still sane and everybody thought I was crazy for buying empty dirt. But I always saw the long game. Great location, easy access, growing traffic every year. I wasn't in a rush. I paid taxes on it every year, kept it mowed, maintained the edges, and left it alone until the right project came along. And everybody around there knew exactly where my line was. The county survey had been filed back in the '80s. Boundary pins in place. No confusion. For years the neighboring business was a little fuel station owned by a husband and wife named Glenn and Marcia. Good people. Never had a single issue. Then Glenn retired, sold the place, and in came a guy named Travis Calloway. First time I met Travis, I was out there mowing. Hot afternoon, dry wind, mower humming, and he pulled up in a shiny black pickup with mirrored sunglasses and that salesman smile that somehow already felt rehearsed. He waved like we'd known each other forever. Said, "You must be Ethan." I shut the mower off and said, "Yeah." He introduced himself, shook my hand, looked around the property a little too long, then casually asked if I'd ever think about selling. I laughed and told him probably not. He smiled wider and said, "Everything's for sale eventually." I said maybe, but not this. He nodded, acted cool about it, told me he respected that, then drove off. I remember thinking he was a little slick, but that was it. I didn't think twice about him after that. Not until 9 weeks later when I saw half my land turned into a commercial overflow lot. I pulled right into the gas station office and found him inside talking with one of his employees. He saw my face, and I swear he knew exactly why I was there. I said, "You paved my property." Just flat like that. No yelling yet. He leaned back against the desk and shrugged like we were discussing weather. Needed more parking. I stared at him. "That's not your land," he said. "You weren't doing anything with it." Like that explained everything. Like vacancy somehow meant public access. Then he smiled and added, "I figured we could work something out. Lease arrangement maybe." I actually laughed because the nerve of it hit me all at once. You don't get to trespass first and negotiate second. His expression changed. Friendly disappeared. He folded his arms and said, "I spent real money on that lot." "Then you should have spent 10 minutes checking a property line." He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "It benefits the whole corridor. More parking means more business. More traffic helps everybody. That asphalt comes out," I told him. "Today." He gave me this look, smug, almost amused. "If you feel strongly, take it up with a lawyer." Then he walked right past me and out the door. I stood there hearing trucks roll over pavement that shouldn't have existed, and I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. On the drive home, I called my attorney, a woman named Dana Mercer. Dana had handled a right-of-way issue for me years earlier, and she was exactly who you wanted when somebody confused confidence with legal authority. Calm voice, sharp as broken glass. She met me that afternoon. We walked the property together. She checked the pins herself, took photos, paced off measurements, and after about 15 minutes, she just looked at me and said, "He didn't even come close." This is blatant. That word somehow made me feel both better and worse. Better because I wasn't crazy. Worse because it meant Travis really had done this knowing full well what he was doing. Dana sent a formal demand letter that same evening. 10 days to remove the pavement, lighting, signage, and restore the property. Straightforward. Professional. No wiggle room. I figured maybe reality would finally hit him once an attorney got involved. Maybe he'd back off. Maybe pride would cost him a little money and we'd move on. Instead, for days later, Dana called me and said, "You're going to want to hear this." Travis had hired a law firm out of Portland. Their response offered to buy my property for about half of assessed value and claimed his improvements had increased market utility. I remember sitting on my porch reading that letter twice because it was so ridiculous I thought I misunderstood it. They paved over my land, then sent paperwork saying I should thank them and sell cheap. That was the exact moment this stopped being about asphalt. It became personal. And deep down, I had a feeling Travis wasn't done pushing yet, not even close. Dana filed the lawsuit the next morning, and from there everything moved faster than I expected, but somehow Travis still managed to make every single part of it worse. You'd think once somebody got served official papers they'd pull back, maybe play defense, maybe stop digging the hole deeper. Travis did the opposite. He doubled down like a man trying to win a poker hand with bad cards and too much ego. While the case was pending, he kept using my land every single day. Trucks rolled in before sunrise and parked there like they owned the place. Campers started lining the edge of the lot. Delivery vans idled for hours. Somebody dumped old pallets near one corner. A week later, I noticed dark oil stains soaking through the fresh pavement where engines had been leaking. Then one afternoon I drove by and saw a guy rinsing out a gray water tank from an RV right near the back fence line. I got out of my truck and yelled, "Hey, absolutely not." The guy looked confused, pointed toward the station office, and said Travis told him it was fine. I marched straight inside. Travis saw me coming and actually smiled. "Still upset?" he asked. I said, "You've got people dumping waste on my property now." He leaned back in his chair and said, "My attorney says continued use helps establish possession." I just stared at him. "You actually think stealing land long enough makes it yours?" He shrugged. "Happens more than you'd think." The thing about guys like Travis is they say insane things casually, like confidence alone can rewrite reality. I left before I said something stupid. Dana called me that night after I sent photos. She was quiet for a second, then said, "Keep documenting everything. Let him keep talking. Judges love overconfidence right before consequences." That became our routine. Every few days I drive out there, take photos, note timestamps, collect receipts, document damage. The more Travis used that lot, the uglier it got. Tire marks, trash, diesel spills. He even added a temporary overflow parking sign near the highway entrance with arrows directing vehicles onto my land. My land. And somehow every time I saw it, I got more calm, not less. That kind of anger burns hot at first, then it settles into something colder and sharper. I stopped reacting. I started preparing. Dana was brilliant. She organized everything into binders, survey records, tax history, county maps, drone shots, witness statements from neighboring businesses. She even found archived photos showing the original boundary stretching back nearly 20 years. By the time our hearing date arrived 8 weeks later, Travis had built himself a mountain and handed us the shovel. The hearing was at the county courthouse in Carson Ridge. Small courtroom, wood-paneled walls, old benches polished smooth from decades of people waiting for life to swing one direction or another. Judge Raymond Harper presided. Late 60s, gray hair, no nonsense. Before becoming a judge, he'd run a construction company for years, and people around town respected him because he didn't care much for theatrics. Travis came in wearing an expensive suit and carrying himself like he already knew the ending. Dana sat beside me with her files stacked perfectly. She whispered, "Let him talk." Judge Harper reviewed the survey first, then the county filings, then photos. Then Dana calmly explained where every pin sat and how the asphalt crossed the boundary by nearly 70 feet. Travis's attorney tried arguing community benefit, then tried claiming uncertainty in the survey, then implied I'd abandoned the land because it was undeveloped. Harper cut him off halfway through. Undeveloped doesn't mean ownerless. Travis finally stood up himself, which, honestly, was the worst thing he could have done. He said he invested heavily, expanded services, brought economic activity to the corridor, and removing the lot would create hardship for his business. Judge Harper folded his hands and looked directly at him. "Did you verify ownership before paving?" Travis hesitated just long enough to answer the question without words. Then he said, "I believed we could negotiate after." Harper nodded once and wrote something down. 10 minutes later the ruling came. Crystal clear. The paved lot sat entirely on my property. Travis had no authority to build there. He had 21 calendar days to remove all pavement, lighting, curbs, signs, and restore the ground. If he failed, I had full legal authority to remove everything myself at his expense. Dana squeezed my arm under the table. Travis looked stunned for about 3 seconds, then annoyed, like somebody had inconvenienced him. Walking out of court, he passed me and muttered, "You're making a mistake." I said, "No, Travis. You made one." Then I went home and waited. Day 3 passed. Nothing. Day 7. Still packed with vehicles. Day 12. Business as usual. Dana sent reminders. Sheriff's office was notified. Travis ignored all of it. Day 18 I drove by after dinner. Sunset across the pavement, trucks parked exactly where they'd been before, lights glowing. He was daring me. Maybe he thought I'd blink. Maybe he figured logistics alone would stop me. But I'd already made arrangements. The demolition company was called High Plains Site Services. Family-owned outfit out of Redfield. I'd used them years back for a grading project. Their owner, Mike Jensen, was 6'4" with hands like concrete blocks and the calmest voice you've ever heard. When I showed him the court order, he smiled and said, "You're serious?" I said, "Very." He looked over the lot and nodded. "Then let's do it clean." We scheduled dawn on day 22. I barely slept the night before. Not because I was nervous exactly. More because the whole thing felt surreal. It's strange planning the destruction of something that never should have existed in the first place. At 5:30 in the morning, I pulled onto the frontage road and saw Mike's crew already there. 2 jackhammer teams. A compact excavator. Dump trucks lined up. Temporary barricades stacked near the entrance. Dana arrived with coffee and a camera. Sheriff's Deputy Mason Alvarez showed up to observe and verify the court order. Cold air. Sun just starting to break over the ridge. The asphalt looked dark and smooth and expensive and very temporary. Mike walked over and said, "Last chance if you're hesitating." I looked across that parking lot, the bright paint, the lights, the sign pointing traffic onto land that never belonged to Travis, and I said, "Start with the center." The first jackhammer hit like thunder. Asphalt cracked instantly. Then again. Big black slabs split apart like dry lake bed. The sound echoed off the gas station canopy. Workers moved fast and clean. Excavator bucket lifting chunks into waiting trucks. Curbs breaking loose. Gravel base tearing upward. Pole lights disconnected and laid flat. It was beautiful in a weird way. Pure reversal. Everything Travis built without permission coming apart piece by piece exactly where he'd put it. Around 9:30, a black pickup came flying into the lot, so hard gravel sprayed across the barricades. Travis jumped out before the truck fully stopped. Face red. Shirt half tucked. Furious doesn't even begin to cover it. He stormed toward the crew shouting, "Stop right now." Deputy Alvarez stepped between him and the machinery. Travis pointed at me. "You can't do this." Dana handed him a copy of the signed order without saying a word. He looked at it, crumpled the corner in his fist, then shouted louder, "You're destroying my business." I finally walked over. Calm. Probably calmer than he'd ever seen me. "You had 21 days. He said. "I spent over 40 grand on this." I shrugged. Should have spent $20 on a survey. Mike's crew kept going behind us. Jackhammers pounding. Asphalt flying. Travis turned and watched one of his light poles get lowered onto a trailer, and I swear for a second, he looked physically sick. Then he glared at me and said, "This isn't over." I believed him. But standing there with the ground opening up under his illegal parking lot, it sure felt like round 1 was ending exactly how it should. By the end of that first day, the place barely looked recognizable. The clean rows of parking spaces Travis had been so proud of were gone, broken into jagged chunks and loaded into truck after truck, while dust drifted through the morning sunlight and settled across the frontage road. By sunset, the pole lights were down, the painted curbs were shattered, and the gravel base underneath had been ripped open. It was loud, messy, and honestly one of the most satisfying things I've ever watched in my life. There's something about seeing arrogance physically dismantled piece by piece that stays with you. Travis spent most of that afternoon pacing near the sheriff's cruiser, talking on his phone, waving his free hand around like he was trying to summon a miracle through sheer frustration. A couple times he tried walking toward the machinery, and Deputy Alvarez stopped him cold. Every time Travis looked my direction, it was like he couldn't decide whether he wanted to threaten me or convince himself I wasn't really doing this. But I was. And by the second morning, there was no denying it. Mike's crew came back before sunrise. The last of the asphalt disappeared by noon. They hauled away 8 full dump truck loads between pavement, debris, and contaminated gravel. Once everything was stripped clean, we could finally see what months of traffic had done underneath. Diesel had seeped through the base. A few spots smelled like petroleum strong enough to hit you standing 10 feet away. Dana took more photos. Mike flagged the worst areas for remediation. Travis stood across the property line with his arms folded, saying nothing now. The anger had burned off overnight, and what replaced it looked worse. Reality. By late afternoon, the ground was leveled smooth again. Fresh fill compacted. Boundary stakes visible. My land looked like mine for the first time in months. I stood there with dirt on my boots and wind coming off the highway, and felt something settle in my chest I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Relief, probably. Or maybe just the quiet feeling of finally getting your footing back after somebody spent months trying to shove you off balance. Travis climbed into his truck without another word and drove off. I figured that might be the end of it. Of course it wasn't. 2 weeks later, Dana called and said, he filed. I laughed before she even finished, because what else do you do at that point? Travis sued me for destruction of private property, loss of business revenue, reputational damage, and emotional distress. Emotional distress. I nearly dropped the phone laughing. Dana didn't laugh. She just said, let him. So we did. Discovery was brutal for him. The invoices came out. The contractor admitted Travis told him not to verify boundaries because he already knew where the line was. Employees testified he'd joked for weeks that I'd eventually cave and sell. One guy even admitted Travis called my vacant parcel free real estate with paperwork lag. That phrase made it into the record. Dana highlighted it in yellow. Then the environmental report came back confirming petroleum contamination from repeated commercial use. That got Judge Harper's attention fast. At the hearing, Travis looked nothing like the confident guy in the polished boots from months earlier. He looked tired. Smaller somehow. His attorney tried arguing business necessity. Harper shut that down immediately. Then Dana laid out the timeline, one piece at a time: documented boundaries, unauthorized construction, written notice, refusal to comply, court order, ignored deadline, contamination. Clean and simple. At one point, Harper looked over his glasses and asked Travis, did you genuinely believe this property belonged to you? Travis hesitated and said, I believed we could resolve it later. Harper nodded slowly. That appears to be a recurring pattern. I swear even the clerk looked up at that one. The ruling came 10 minutes later. Full dismissal of Travis's claims. Then reimbursement. Every legal bill. Every filing fee. $28,000 for demolition. $15,000 for soil remediation. Additional penalties tied to willful trespass. Dana squeezed my shoulder and whispered, that should get his attention. It did. Travis sold the station less than 4 months later. Last I heard, he moved south toward Nevada chasing another business deal somewhere. I haven't seen him since. The new owners are decent folks. We wave when we pass. They asked once if the old parking lot story was actually true. I told them yep, every ridiculous second of it. These days my land still sits there by the highway. Clean, open, and quiet. The same long-term investment I bought all those years ago. Sometimes I park by the edge near sunset and just look across it. The boundary stakes are still visible. Wind moving through the grass. Trucks passing on Route 26. And every now and then I remember that first morning. The shock of seeing fresh pavement where it had no business being. That helpless feeling in your gut when somebody acts like your rights only matter if they decide they do. I think that's the part people understand when they hear this story. It was never really about asphalt. It was about somebody deciding entitlement gave them permission. It was about what happens when a person mistakes patience for weakness. And I'll be honest, part of me still wonders what would have happened if I'd let it slide. If I'd taken the lowball offer, shrugged it off, let the trucks keep rolling. Maybe Travis would have won. Maybe he'd have taken the whole parcel eventually. Maybe he'd still be standing there today telling himself he earned it. But he didn't. Because sometimes the right thing isn't loud at first. Sometimes it starts with paperwork, patience, and waiting for the exact moment the law hands you the green light, and then showing up at sunrise with jackhammers. If you made it this far, tell me what you think. Was Travis just greedy? Or did he genuinely believe money and pressure would make me back down? And be honest, if somebody paved over your land and ignored a court order, would you have waited like I did? Or would you have brought the demolition crew out a whole lot sooner? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor or business owner who thought the rules didn't apply to them, I'd really like to hear that story too.